In general, my mission is to reawaken that curiosity of listening that leads people to understand their world a little bit. In the face of so much visual thought, what I mean by that is a spreadsheet, a rendering, the communication tools for building our world are mainly visual, and they have been for quite some time. That doesn't mean that all the other senses are forgotten, but you can see reflected in the built environment the fact that visuals has been the main currency. It's very easy to use your eyes to objectify, to assign a value to a cell in a spreadsheet, and there's no real analogy for hearing. So hearing gets left out. What does that mean? That means we end up with places like, the MoMA sculpture garden, where every visual hair is in place and it sounds like any taxi stand. And what does that say about the culture? So my mission is to instill curiosity of listening that leads to an understanding of the world that balances out the senses a little bit. What could that mean? When you go outside and you look for global warming, you don't see it because you think in visual snapshots, and the time gets sucked out of the equation. I see the Statue of Liberty. I was here. Check it off the list. It's off my list. I've checked that box. I'm not thinking about it any longer. But if you go and listen, then you're in a rhythm of things that are happening. Then you're in a rhythm of small changes and long changes, and you're observing with a different part of your brain. That other part of your brain is important. Why? It hasn't really been manipulated yet. So it's telling kind of a true story. And when you engage with this true story of listening that comes up by, for instance, removing the distractions like this. I hear 100 people through a plate glass window that's supposed to be soundproof. Just for starters. What else do I hear? Lighting filaments that are supposed to be silent. A lot of unintentional noises. Now, so what? One could say so what? But I remind you that you can't see global warming, but you can hear it. It's very easy to hear it. You walk outside, close your eyes, listen to the loudest thing. Maybe it's a helicopter. Well, the thing was designed to fly a titan of industry from point A to point B. It wasn't designed to spread sound waves over 1 million people's ears as it passes over the city, maybe flash some of them back to Nam, maybe aggravate the situation and give a sort of an edgy feeling like I'm being observed, I'm down here, all of the psychoacoustic factors and memory factors with aircraft, and specifically helicopters, have to do with death from above. So the intent of the person is to get their commute done quickly. But the resulting unintentional sound is spraying out fear to maybe millions of people below, making their day a little more edgy and tense, maybe seriously altering the mood, how they're operating, what their life feels like to them. So when you walk outside and you listen and you think, it's not enough to just listen. You have to connect your ears up to your brain a little bit, and instantly you have a rebuttal, a cultural rebuttal. You have a place to stand. That vibration is really happening right now, and you can't tell me it isn't. So what is it? It's a highway. What does that mean? Oh, that highway sliced through Boston, and it separated a certain part of Boston from another part of Boston. And if you walk near that, you're sprayed by maybe 75, 85 decibel radial tires. So it increases a tension zone between that part of the Boston and the other part of Boston, slicing it apart. What else does it mean? Why is that highway there? Well, there's a group of people who make a lot of money with cement. There's a group of people who make a lot of money with, listen, what is it? Radial tires, yes, listen, what is it? Fossil fuels, listen, what is it? Infrastructure. All of those things create wealth for some people. And then think a little bit further. What is that highway? That highway was built during Eisenhower for the Cold War. It's a Cold War highway that generated miles and miles of suburbs. So there's a constant transit on that highway. The more successful the highway became, the further people drive. So now it's that way all the time. What is that sound? That's the sound of an entire culture who wants to be somewhere else. That's the sound of a displaced culture. That's the howling sound of a displaced culture. So once you start to listen, your circle of empathy expands. My fear is that the circle of empathy of Americans as a populace has shrunk to the head of a pin, or maybe to the size of the screen of their iPad, or their iPhone, or their Android. The circle of empathy highly resembles a digital copy of me. So shut that off, close your eyes, listen, expand into the world around you, connect to the world around you. This is full of stories. It's full of stories about who we are, how we live, how we really live. Those are the real stories. Those are not the PR stories. The PR stories are really easy to fabricate and make a website of or publish, and replication of visuals is so easy. And it's all been market tested. It's all been driven by people who have an agenda. By the time you see a piece of paper or a picture, it's been product tested. But the world out there is reflecting all the sounds that are actually really going on right now, and they have an honest, true story to tell.
I was going to ask you, you use the term sonic commons a lot. And I was going to ask you to tell us a little bit more about that term and what it means to you.
Well, it's a loaded term, and it's loaded in some interesting ways, sonic commons. Of course, it brings up the failure of the commons. It brings up ideas of public space. It brings up questions about what could a sonic commons mean. But on its most basic level, we created a built environment, and people are only worried about the territory inside that built environment. The air-conditioned space that's insulated against the outside world, protected by plate glass windows and security systems. That's what we build. That's the square footage that's so important. And the square footage that's outside, the negative space that reflects all of the activities, all the sounds I was just talking about, that whole set of sounds of a fossil-fueled culture, is shared by all the people in the city in that negative space between the buildings. That's the sonic commons. Every sound that everybody makes within earshot is shared. I mean, you can't hand a sound out like a business card. It goes everywhere. It goes past all the boundaries, and it reflects upon all the proud buildings and whatever people have built in the past as a built environment. The power of the past encoded in the built environment is now reflecting the current power usage, literally. And that's the sonic commons. So we share that space without much thought. But it also shapes how we feel about those spaces, how we use those spaces, what our psychology is towards those spaces, whether we feel included or unincluded. We don't have much language to talk about these things. Because when we think about hearing, we think about our cell phone ring, yes, I can hear that. Our mother's voice, yes, I can hear her. Basically signal tones that are cutting through the rather high noise floor that is the cultural waveform that we pretend doesn't exist. But that's our sonic commons. That's what we share. And we basically use that term to provoke a discussion about that shared acoustical space that we ignore, that's mainly filled with unintentional sounds. Maybe 75 dB of unintentional sounds. Enough unintentional sounds that humans have lost about 50% of their communication space and had to replace it with texting, because Do I really want to shout, I love you? Maybe on certain occasions. Do I want to shout, would you like an ice cream cone? What does it mean after you shout, let's get some chocolate to your daughter? Because the space is already gone. Now, human beings have a limited range of communication powers. It's human scale. But the soundscape that we've come to adopt through our cultural choices is not in human scale. It's an industrial scale soundscape that doesn't fit our given operating system, our ability to produce tones with our larynx and resonate them in a meaningful way to somebody else. To resonate them in a meaningful way to somebody else. To resonate them in a meaningful way. I'm pretending to speak in a common way, but I have to come up over the sound of the bar that's outside there, so I'm actually in a frightful state, trying to communicate something simple. Now this is the result of being a human with human skills and communication possibilities in an inadvertently industrial soundscape, our sonic commons.
Could you tell us, or do you have any explanation for why our ears have been more neglected than our eyes in the past and today as well?
Well, wasn't always thus that our ears were neglected. Most of the communication happened acoustically through most of human history. And then there were some pretty great inventions that powered up the Renaissance, the printing press, the movable type, the ability to cheaply and quickly reproduce visual objects for distribution. That happened a good 400 years before that happened to audio. So documents that would declare ownership of land stopped being verbal and started being written. That's pretty powerful. Verbal agreements were replaced by legal agreements. That's pretty powerful. If you wish to convince somebody of something, then you printed a paper instead of standing and ringing a bell on the corner and telling everybody within earshot. Eyeshot got large. So naturally, those who wish to communicate on a large scale and influence history would tend to move towards a visual medium for their distribution of their ideas they wish to see happen. It's pretty natural, and there's a few hundred years of that. We've gotten really incredibly good. Then there was visual perspective that came up so that people could share ideas of shapes and sizes and things with a drawing or a compressed algorithm or a little bit of math. That never happened really in audio. So you could take Renaissance visual perspective, add a huge processor, and end up with a Sony PlayStation. You know, it's just faster math and the same idea. So there's been an agreement of how to communicate in that way, in a compressed and tight and highly sophisticated way for a long period of time. That tends to carry the cultural moment. But I think that swing has pushed us into a place where we've built a lot of things that make no sense, that we've built a lot of systems that make no sense and are really quite dangerous. So if we're looking for information, then stop calling it noise and start saying that's the sound of our culture. Take it apart. Use your ears as a toolkit. Take it apart. There's some great thinking to be done along this topic to achieve some sort of sustainable balance or even survival. Everybody's got the tools right there. And it's simply a matter of plugging them into your brain and start to remember what you've heard. Start to remember the spaces that you've gone through and how you felt. It's not about, can I hear my cell phone ring, or did the quality of my call diminish when I got the new operating system? It's about, I am in the center of a field of information that's constant and shifting and important and interesting. And in it are the clues to all the power we're using in our society. How do we want to use it?